Lazy D here. Today I'm working on this 2022 Honda Rancher 420. I'm going to be doing an annual maintenance on this machine. This information is going to apply to most Honda Ranchers from 2014 to 2022 and maybe a few years past that. I'm going to put affiliate links for service kits if you need that in the description. They're pretty convenient. Some of them even come with cool little like flexi spouts and stuff like that. In this video, I'm going to cover a lot of maintenance items. Not everything by any means, but you know, the basics, and then probably a few things most people don't know. I'm going to hit engine oil, front and rear differential oil, air filter, which is a cool one. There's some stuff there that a lot of people don't know. The spark plug, and then adjusting your brakes, and then kind of a thorough inspection on this machine. So there's, I think, some good information here. If you like this video or it's helpful to you, please like, comment, or subscribe. So usually when you're due for a service, there's going to be a wrench that displays right here. So you can see this wrench is on, and there's a regular wrench. This, if there's no number by it, that means that this is the first service. And this unit has only 300 miles. It is a couple years old though, so we're going to do a full service. But anytime you see that wrench indicator come on, you're due for service. These indicators, when you reset them, reset to either 100 hours or 600 miles. So if you see that on and you don't have time for a service, it's a good opportunity to make sure, if you're going to extend your service interval, check your oil, check the air filter, just check some basics, because it only takes a second to add a little bit of oil, even if you don't have time for a full oil change, and it could save your engine. It's a good idea to thoroughly wash your machine before any service. This is going to help you identify any broken or missing components or any items that may be starting to wear a lot better than when it's covered in mud and dirt. And I know a lot of ranchers use these to get covered in hay and cow crap and all this stuff. So if you have the ability, it's really in everyone's best interest to just clean this as thoroughly as you can. And I'm going to go through here with you some good parts to clean. To get your machine as clean as possible, it's a good idea before you clean it to disassemble some of the plastics and stuff here. So I'm going to show you that. This seat, you should be able to reach back here. There's a clip. You can pull this up. The seat will come off. And then normally these machines don't have this, but I marked this as kind of a visual aid. I put some yellow marks. There's a push in clip here. There's one here and one back here. So these we're going to pull away from the machine, outboard on both sides. And then there's a clip up here that needs to go up. So we're going to pop the 3 clips on each panel. This is all one piece. And then we're going to pull this off. So I'm going to show you that. Now with those disconnected, you should just be able to pull this whole piece up and kind of wiggle it back. The next thing we're going to take off here, so if you come back by your tail light, there's this rubber latch. So your tail light's going to come down. And then this panel here, which covers the battery and some of your electronics, you'll pull up on each of these corners here. And then you should be able to pull this out and up. As you can see, this person's put kind of a homemade bed on this thing, I would say. You got to make these things work for what you need them for, but sometimes people make these, they don't consider maintenance when they're doing it, and it makes it a little bit tight. I can still get this out, but if you're going to do something like this, you should try to leave room. And the rear carrier rack has kind of an indentation in it to go back a little bit further. I would try to follow that if you're going to do something like this. Like I said, I've already cleaned my machine, but I see a lot of these machines, especially when people are moving hay, that a ton of debris over a period of time will end up in this compartment, which houses a lot of your electronics. Your starter solenoids down here, your fuse boxes down here, another fuse in your battery. So if you need to clean this better, because you're going to want to get all that stuff out, what happens is this stuff builds up and it'll plug that little drain. I think you can see it down there. and then these will fill up with water and it'll corrode all your electrical. You'll create a, you know, a nasty problem. And if you start to get hay down there, rodents really like this area to start building a nest in. So to make it easier to clean in here, if your electrical box down here is really filled up with stuff, this fuse box, if you push the center of this, you can push in the clip, and then you can lift up your fuse box out of here, and you can lift this up and out of the way. There's actually quite a bit of cord here, and you can even see there's residual left even after I've cleaned. So you really want to clean all this stuff out. These are weatherproof, but you don't want to push your luck here. Additionally, if you want to, you can take the battery out. There is this rubber retainer that holds this in place. And usually there's a little bit more room, but this board is in the way. But you can see there's quite a bit of debris here. So I'm going to take some extra time and clean this. It's a good idea. You should clean this at least annually. You should do this. If not, a little bit more often. If you're doing extra services, you should definitely hit up this area and clean it as best you can. So this is the retainer that holds down your battery. I want to point out, most of these Honda ATVs, your battery cover, there's an extra one of these. If this breaks and you need it, you can use this to re-secure your battery and keep it from jiggling around. So we're going to be working around the front differential. Here's the fill for it. You're definitely going to want to clean around this and areas above it, so when you have that open, you don't drop anything in there. With this paneling off, you can get in between the front differential and the engine pretty well. Try to clean that out. The spark plug is down here. Make sure you clean in there real good. Around at the back here, it's a nice time when you're servicing to adjust your rear brake cables. So this is for your hand lever and your foot lever. There's an adjustment for each. Your rear differential is here. You're going to be working there too. There's your fill plug up top, your level plug on the side. So clean that up as best you can. At the right rear wheel, this is your voltage regulator. This is what converts the AC voltage that your engine produces to DC for your battery. When it does that, it creates heat, and if these fins can't disperse the heat like they need to, these units can overheat and fail. Good idea to keep an eye on it. They get packed full of mud all the time. Your oil filter is going to be here on the right side of the engine. We're going to be working right there, so definitely clean around there as best you can as well. The first part of this service I'm going to start with is the engine oil change. Ideally, you want the oil to be warm when you do this. So I'm going to fire this thing up and let it run for 5 or 10 minutes before I drain it. Getting the oil warm and any small particulates suspended in the oil is going to help them flush out of your engine when you drain it. So my engine is warmed up. To drain the oil, I'm going to go below from the left side. You can do this from either side. There's a hole, and right there is your drain plug. It's a 17 millimeter. I'm going to go ahead and take that out and drain my oil. Ideally, you don't want to drop the plug in like I just did, but I'm going to let this drain until it's about dripping. Then I'm going to put the plug back in. Usually when you take these drain plugs off, the old sealing washer is going to be stuck to the drain plug. In my case, it was actually stuck on the engine itself. So make sure you get the old one off. Most new kits are going to come with this sealing washer that you definitely want to put on before putting this back in. Not quite a drip yet, but most of the oil is out. I'm going to go ahead and put the drain plug back in. And now I'm going to torque this drain plug. I have a pretty good feel for this. I'm going to put the spec here for you. Next step here, the oil change, is to change the oil filter. When you take this oil filter cap off, oil is going to drain kind of down in your plastics and stuff. So I have a drain pan below, but what I like to do is get some rags, kind of stuff them in this area. And what you can do is you can kind of create a funnel effect to get the oil at least over into the footwell here, where it's a little bit easier to clean. So when this drains, hopefully it'll come down the rag and out the bottom of the footwell here. These 3 bolts are 8mm headed. I'm gonna go ahead and take those out. Once these are out, you should just be able to pull on this, wiggle it back and forth, and get this to pop out. And with those rags there, you can see that it kind of drained a little bit better instead of all over everything. This filter's looking a little smashed, which is not totally normal. Your service kit should have come with 2 O-rings. There's an O-ring for the cap here we're going to replace, and there's an O-ring here that we're going to replace on the engine block. So I just have a little pocket screwdriver here. I'm going to reach under, pry this thing out. Not a bad idea to hang on to these. Occasionally you'll tear one of these O-rings putting them in. It's nice to have an extra laying around. And this O-ring, I'm just going to use some oil from in the case here. I'm going to lube it up so this slides in nice. And then I'm going to put the new oil filter in. These will say, like this one says, this side spring towards engine. So in the back here, let me get a little closer. There's a spring. If that is falling out of the way, you're definitely going to want to put that back. So this is going to go towards the spring. It's a little bit easier. I'm just going to stick the rubber end here on this cap. There's a nub on your oil filter cap there. And then I'm going to slip this in here. I'm just going to set it there, hold it with my thumb, and put the screws in. Now I'm going to evenly tighten these down. I'm going to put the torque spec in here. Bruise. If you feel any resistance with this going in, you're not doing it right. Try again. Now I'm going to remove my rags, which prevented a pretty good mess down below here, which is awesome. I'm going to wipe this off. You definitely want to make sure you wipe this oil filter cover off, get it very clean. That way, once you start this, you can make sure you check this for leaks. And if you leave oil there, you'll be second guessing yourself whether it's leaking or if you cleaned it well enough when you were done. So just take a few seconds, wipe this off, make sure there's no drips. So we're back on the left side of the ATV here. This is going to be our fill cap and our dipstick. This is where we're going to fill the engine oil. This one's a manual shift model, so it's going to take 3 quarts of oil. If you have a electric shift model, it's going to take about 4. I'll put this fluid spec up here. If you're not using a kit and you want to source your own, sometimes that's helpful. I've put in my oil. Now before starting this machine, I'm going to check the oil level. So our dipstick, Honda says in their manual, you put this in without screwing it in and pull it back out. That's how we check our level. So we can see mine is, we'll just focus here, is pretty much at the full mark, which is great, maybe a little above it. I'm going to go ahead and screw this in. I'm going to run the engine. The manual says 3 to 5 minutes, then let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes. And then I'm going to check it again. Don't forget to recheck your oil filter cap. After it's run for a few, make sure you have no drips anywhere around here. Now that I've let the engine run for a few and set for a few, I'm going to pull this dipstick back out, wipe it off, put it in without threading it in, pull it out, and our level is pretty good. So I'd say it's about halfway up the dipstick. You could add a little more, but this is the acceptable level. Next thing I'm going to do here is change the oil in the rear differential or final drive. There's 3 bolts, 12mm headed, one there, one up in there, and then one towards the front right there to take this skid plate off. You don't have to take the skid plate off. I like to. Usually there's a bunch of garbage in there that is a good idea to clean out. I'm gonna go ahead and take those off, then I'm gonna drain the oil. With the skid plate off, you can see how dirty this drain plug area is. This is one of the reasons I like to take the skid plate off, is I don't want to get any of that dirt, you know, stuck in between the sealing washer and the drain plug when I put it back in. So I'm gonna clean this off. 10mm headed bolt. I'm gonna take this out to drain it. This bolt here is our fill level plug. See right here, it says oil check bolt. So when we fill it, we're gonna leave this out. And when it overflows here, that's full. And then up here is the fill plug. This is 17mm headed plug. I'm going to take our fill plug out to vent this. I'm going to take the fill cap out while I wait for this to drain. So now I'm going to wait for this to drain to a drip. I'm going to put the drain plug back in. Before I put the drain plug back in, this is the drain plug and the level plug, they're the same. I'm going to replace the sealing washer. Most kits you're going to get are not going to come with these sealing washers. I have like an assortment. I'm going to put a link for this assortment in the description below, an affiliate link. If you want to get one, these are pretty handy to have around when you're doing this kind of work, because you know it never fails and you need a few, and some of these get pretty nasty. This one's, you know, only a couple years old. I'm just not comfortable putting something gritty in a customer's machine. And you know, if these things leak, especially in the rear differential, you may not catch it, and eventually running without oil, you're going to ruin your gearbox. So these are an M8 size. I'm going to go ahead and put new ones in, put them in and torque them. I'll put the torque spec in here. So now I have my level plug still out. I'm going to fill up from our fill cap up here until it overflows. You can go pretty slow here. It takes a while for the oil to run down and then overflow. It's pretty easy to overfill them. If you do, you can just let it drip out the fill plug until it's done. There we go. It's dripping out the fill plug. That's a perfect level. Put this plug in and then torque this down. With the level plug back in, last thing is to put this fill cap back in and torque it down. I put my skid plate back on. There's 3 bolts. The one that's different goes in the front position. Next up is the front differential. The fill plug is here. That's a 17mm head. Drain plug's up in this hole right there. 10mm head also. I'm going to take that out. While the front differential is draining, I'm going to take out this fill plug. It's a 17mm head, and I use a 6-inch extension on a ratchet. Just enough room to get outside here and open that guy up. Same as the rear differential, this takes a sealing washer. Most kits don't come with these. Like I said, in the video description, I'll have an assortment of these, but they're an M8 size if you only want to get the size you're going to need. This sealing washer did not come off with the bolt, so I had to reach up here and kind of scrape it off with this pocket screwdriver. Be careful, you don't want to damage the threads or anything, but you do want to make sure you get this replaced if you can. I'll put the torque for the drain plug here. The front differential takes the same oil as the rear. I'm going to go ahead and fill it now. The fill level for this is until it overflows from the fill. I got it full up to the threads there. I'm going to go ahead and put the fill cap in and torque this. Next up is our engine air filter. I'm going to take these 4 clips off to get the lid off the air box. There's a hose clamp that holds the air filter to the ducting here. I'm going to go ahead and loosen that. I'm going to take this air filter out. This one's pretty clean still. There's some debris. Since this person doesn't do a lot of their own maintenance, I'm gonna go ahead and replace this anyway, even though you can clean and re-oil these. I would bet most people don't do this step. It is critical that you do this to preserve your engine. Honda air filters do not come oiled when you buy them. The manual says you need to oil them. Most people throw these in, they just don't do it. So I'm gonna put Honda's recommended oil as a spec up here real quick. I just use this Lucas foam filter oil, which is, it says equivalents are good. So it gives you a specific amount, which is in grams. So it says from 17 to 23 grams of oil should go in this oil filter. So I'm at 314. So if I do 17 to 23, that's gonna be like 397, or excuse me, this should be at 297 would be 17. So I could do like 295. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like. So there's 309, I gotta keep going. As you can see, a little bit's dripping off, so I'll go a little bit on the heavy side here. .305, keep going. .296, I'm gonna keep going because I got a few drips going here. But about that much oil, I'm at 287 is what you want. Once you get the oil in here, you're gonna wanna squeeze your air filter, make sure you're using clean gloves, and disperse this stuff throughout the foam filter. So as you can see, the more I do this, it disperses through the foam, and this is what's gonna stick the dirt in your filter so it doesn't pass through into your engine. So very important. This doesn't have to be perfect. After this oil sits in the foam for a while, it will disperse itself, but a good kind of squeeze. You don't want to wring it like you're wringing out some clothes or something. You just want to squish it, something like that. So that's pretty good. This is all going to disperse on its own later. Now to get the old filter off this filter cage, I'm just going to take this hose clamp off. Try to push down on this old filter. And pull this cage out. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the opposite. I'm going to push it into the new filter. Push this down. Can be a little bit troublesome sometimes to get it over the edge, but if you kind of pull from inside the filter like I just did, and then put our hose clamp back on. Now this filter is ready to be serviced. I'm going to put a link for the oil I use and the scale in the description if you want to use this, but get some filter oil. A scale is nice. You might be able to eyeball it, but you want to evenly disperse throughout the filter foam. We go ahead and put our air filter back in. Super easy. Push it all the way on, then tighten up this Phillips hose clamp. Put our lid back on. Just like that. Next up I'm going to do here is a spark plug. You can clean and re-gap these. I'll put the spec up here for what that gap would be. Most service kits come with a new spark plug, so I tend to just change them. It is a good idea though to check the gap on your new plug. I'm gonna go ahead and pull on this. You definitely want to pull on the insulator piece and on the wire. Pull this up and out. Definitely make sure that area is clean. I blew this out with compressed air. A little crusty looking. Could just be cleaned and reused. The electrode doesn't look rounded off and the gap doesn't look too wide, but just because these kits come with them, it's so easy just to put a new plug. put the torque in here. And then we'll just push our cap back on until we hear it it should click on. Like that, good to go. This one's pretty quick. This is how you clean your spark arrestor. We're gonna pull this plug out here. You'll see it's a square drive. You can actually use a 13 millimeter or a 1/2 inch box end 12 point to get on there, or you can use a socket as well. We're gonna pull this plug out. Oh, see, we had some water, so it's good we did this. So now with the plug out, we're gonna start the engine, let it warm up for a few, and rev it a few times. Now we'll go ahead and put this plug back in. I used a pocket screwdriver. There was some crap in here. I just picked it out. We'll put the torque spec in here for this as well. Next here, I'm going to show you your brake adjustment. This is for your rear brake. So you can see on the hand lever here, there's a lot of play before you actually start engaging the brake on this one. And even the parking brake, when you set it, I'll fold this back so you can see. When you pull this and set it, the parking brake really isn't that tight. So to adjust that, we're gonna come back here to the rear. There's two adjusters right here. The upper one is for your hand brake, the lower one is for your foot brake. So we can see here, if I push this brake lever to where it engages, this is where that play is right here that we're feeling in the hand brake. I'm just going to turn this. Sometimes it's going to be kind of tough to turn. Like mine, the whole thing's spinning. So I'm going to have to get an 8 millimeter here to hold this while I turn it. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. This one's pretty tight. You could spray a little bit of penetrating oil on here. It might help you out. The more frequent you do this, the easier it's going to be. So I got a couple turns on there. Still going to keep going here for a second. It's kind of freed up now. So now with that adjustment, you go back up top and see how that feels. So much better. It's taking a lot of play out. You do want to make sure though you can still apply your parking brake when you need to. So it's kind of tough to do with one hand here. Pull that tight. Flip this forward. See, that's probably too tight. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen it back off a little bit. Maybe go out 2 or 3 turns here. So that feels pretty good. There's still a little bit of play before you actually start engaging the brake, but that's a good spot for it to be. Same thing with the rear brake here. If this is engaging lower than you want, you can take some of that play out of that lower adjuster. I'll show you that. Same thing here. I'm gonna hold this 8 millimeter that's on the cable. Turn this a few times. You don't want to adjust this so much that there's no play here. You don't want your brakes dragging. And that has definitely improved my pedal feel here. You may also be wondering the condition of your brake shoes. It's kind of tough to access these on these Hondas. You'd have to take the wheel off and take this cover off. But what they've done is there's an indicator. This is a pointer, this steel piece here. And when that pointer aligns with this pointer up here, it's time to replace your brake shoes. When servicing your machine, you're going to want to do a pretty thorough inspection of everything. Part of that is going to be getting the wheels off the ground and sometimes removing the wheels. I have this wheel still attached, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to feel at the 3 and 9 position, left and right, and feel for any play. And if there is some play I can feel, there's a tiny bit on this one, I'm not worried. Looks like it may be in the steering shaft. pretty normal to have a tiny bit, but if you feel any excess looseness, you may want to check your inner or outer tie rod ends. And then when you check it 12 and 6, if you feel any looseness, you may have a bad wheel bearing. But you definitely want to feel each way on all your wheels, all the way around, front and rear, to see if you have any upcoming items that may be needing service. I've taken the wheel off the left side here. I'm going to show you. You can actually inspect your brakes without taking the wheels off. Kind of hard to see, but there's a little pointer right there. When that pointer lines up, with this tall edge that's on the caliper, that's indicating that your pad is worn and you need to replace it. Obviously, if you have the wheel off, you can just look at the pad. You may want to really take a look at your inner pad. Those tend to wear faster. And obviously inspect your rotor as well for any, cracks, heavy grooves, heat marks, things like that are items that are going to indicate that you're ready to service your brakes. Also, while you're in the area, you're going to want to check your inner or your outer and inner CV boots on both axles. These are common items to tear. If you keep your machine dirty or something, a stick could jam up there and poke a hole in one. But if you catch these early, you can just replace the boot. Otherwise, if they become damaged, you're going to end up replacing the whole axle. This reservoir here is on the left side front under the fender. This is your coolant level. This one's perfect. It's right at the upper mark. I'll put the coolant spec in here if you need to add some, or if you want to change it. Honda recommends every 2 years, but if you pop this off, you can add coolant to the reservoir here, and your radiator cap is here if you needed to add some directly to your radiator. Also, I want to show you real quick, this is obvious, but there's a sight glass in your master cylinder up here for your front brakes. So you should be able to see brake fluid in there. If you don't see any fluid, you might want to bleed your brakes. This could mean you have if it is low, it could mean you have a leaky caliper or a leaky hose or fitting somewhere, and you may just need to refill it and bleed them. Otherwise, you may have to replace a leaking component. Also, inspect your tires. Bald tires and hilly terrain or wet terrain is not a good recipe for success. If you see damage to your tires, replace them. I'll put the tire pressure spec in here. Also, it's listed right here, so it's pretty light. 4.4 psi front and rear for this machine. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this cover back on. These can be a little bit tricky. There's tabs you need to line up here and here with some tabs on the paneling, and down in the bottom by your foot there's some tabs you got to line up, and then those push pins we got to get in. Take your time. It's pretty easy to break the hardware on these. And then we'll slip our seat back in. There's a clip up front. We got a clip here first. We'll just push this down. Good to go. Last thing I'm going to do here is reset our maintenance reminder. So I'm going to turn the key on. We're going to see that this wrench is set. So what we want to do is cycle through until we get to our service counter, which is right here, that's saying we're 212 miles past due for the first service. What I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down this button. I'm going to try to do this with one hand and turn the key off. Then I'm going to turn the key back on while I'm holding the button. And now this wrench should flash a few times, and that should reset it. So now if we go back to our service interval, it's telling us we're due in 600 miles or 100 hours. Thanks for watching this video. If you found this helpful, please like, comment, or subscribe. It really helps out the channel.